Hey, happy Sunday to you. Hope you're having yourself a great day. I'm Eric, and you're watching Eric's Crypto Corner. I'm a tax accountant with now just 17 years tax experience, just ticked over that landmark there just recently. And I've been in the crypto space for about 5 years. I've been buying, selling, GPU mining, ASIC mining, and doing some other stuff with AI. So let's go ahead and get started into today's video. All right, so one of my favorite things to do as kind of a hobby is tinker, with computers. I built several computers over the last 5 years, but today we're going to basically go through how I build a computer. This is going to be probably a really, really slow and boring video for most of you to watch, but if you're somebody that enjoys watching somebody that is fairly confident in building computers, but wants to listen to how I do it and maybe a little bit more about my history, how I got into crypto and how I got into mining. This is a good video to just kind of watch casually. It is a little bit lengthy. I think it's actually over an hour. So get your coffee, get your whiskey, whatever you're in the mood for, time of day, and hopefully you enjoyed today's video. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. I've got my case all lined up, and the first thing you're going to notice inside of this case is there's going to be, these little standoff pins. There's 9 of them, and this is an ATX case, and I have an ATX motherboard here that we're going to be using today. So I just got a, probably see that there, a Gigabyte B550 Eagle. I'm a kind of a AM4 guy. I like the pricing of the AM4 CPUs, and so here's the motherboard. And really, what you're going to see here is this cat is going to go in this way. And you could actually try to line it up. They've got these ports that should line up with your case with no problems. All right, so we've got that all set. Now the case, the Montech XR case that I bought, comes with all these screws and everything. So you can go ahead and open this up or tear it apart like what I'm doing. And you're going to see one that literally says motherboard screws. So I'm going to grab this, open this up. And I'm going to go ahead and grab these screws. And you're going to see that the motherboard has 9 holes that should all line up with those stand-up pins that we were just talking about. So we're just going to take this. I don't like the screwdriver. Let's try a smaller one here. All right, so you can go ahead and just start screwing this cat in. Preferably we don't drop or lose, your screws. Like I'm doing. I probably don't have the best tools. Being an accountant, this is not normally how I use my hands. But I do like tinkering. I actually started doing computer building about a year ago when Salad had come out. I didn't want, before that, I had actually been mining Ethereum back in 2020. I started in October of 2020. And what I did is I bought a bunch of Dell, G5000 or Alienwares back then. And I just thought, oh man, this is just so much easier. I can just buy a pre-made computer. It comes with the graphics cards I want. It comes with the RAM. And I've kind of been comfortable working with computers most of my life. My dad was into computers, and so I kind of was a computer nerd even from like college days, and I just turned 49 recently, so you know, I've been kind of putzing with computers for quite a while. But anyways, so I bought all these pre-made computers from Dell. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually backing the screw out a little bit and then tightening it down just to make sure it's in there nicely. You really shouldn't have to tighten these down ridiculous amounts. They should tighten pretty nicely. So anyways, I had bought, you know, all these Dell computers, and it was really kind of cool because I bought, like, I don't know, a couple at a time, but then I would just set them up for, you know, Ethereum mining. All right, so I'm just kind of checking this over. This all looks pretty good, like it's in. All right. So the next thing is the CPU. So the CPU is right here. This is AM4. I'll go grab my processor. So the big thing when you're building a computer is you want to make sure that the processor that you have, you know, an AM4, matches your motherboard. So if you don't have the right processor, and I've actually done this when I very first started building computers, I bought the wrong processor for the motherboard I have, and I was like, why isn't this working? So just make sure that, you know, your motherboard is compatible with your processor. And you can kind of see, you know, obviously you have a couple different flavors here, but the Ryzen, AMD Ryzen, and this is saying AM4, and it works with a 5000, you know, desktop ready processor. This is a 5000 series processor. It is an AM4 processor. So I don't even know if it says AM4 anywhere on here, but you can actually just look up, you know, online or whatever to make sure that this processor will work with your motherboard. I'm going to go ahead and just open this guy up. You know, and I'm sure there's going to be people, and I'll continue that GPU story here, or the Dell story, in a little while, but I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to tell me, oh, you're not using anti-static, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah, I'm not. Okay, I'm not a computer. It's not what I do during the day. This is just something I'm doing and showing you what I do for fun. So what we can see here is we have the processor, and it kind of opens, you know, down to the bottom here. Now, it's very important here, I'm not a computer guy, but these parts in the back of your processor, the chips or whatever, the cores, threads, whatever, don't touch any of that. But this has to line up with that just right. So when we look at this thing, I'm going to actually just unlock this guy down here. So this guy, you kind of pull towards you and then just open it up. And there should be a little arrow. I think it's right here. There's this little notch right here. And the other three sides, you see how the other three sides, you might have to zoom in a little bit here, but the other three sides have this little like triangle on it, and this one has a little notch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just pull, you know, this processor out without touching it as best as I can. Now, just by looking at this, I'm just looking at this here. Okay, so there is this little notch up there, and now on your processor, there's this little notch right here. It actually has a little arrow by it, and that's the way that we're going to be putting this in here. And that should just drop in. Okay, that's it. And then you go ahead and just close this guy down, and you're done. So the big part is just make sure that when you're doing this step, you don't mess around with any of the backside of that processor. You don't have a bunch of dirt on your hands or something. You don't touch it. And then you line up the little arrow that's on the corner of your processor with the space that is supposed to point to on the motherboard, the little area there. Okay? Okay, so we're back. I kind of read the instructions a little bit for this Montech fan. And I wanted this fan because I'm just an RGB nerd. I want stuff to look cool. And, you know, I don't want to have it if it's just boring and lame. So I don't mind spending a couple extra bucks. I think this is like $30 or $25 for this fan, and it has RGB. And because it's the same fans that come with the case, that's what I kind of wanted it for. So I was reading the instructions a little bit. I also looked at a little YouTube video, and so pretty much I did have to do this before on my last AMD 4 build, is we actually just take out like the default brackets that come here like this. And oddly enough, I had to do the same thing with, so anyways, the CPU is a 5700X. I kind of wanted to get this CPU. I have it on another computer of mine. I wanted to get this CPU because it is not a terrible CPU crypto mining processor for like I don't know, I think it was $140, $150. If I can do a lot of different stuff with an older model like this for 5700X. Yeah, you can get a 5900X or 5950X or the 3D ones or whatever, and they'll make probably a little bit more money. But I've been in crypto mining for quite a while. Like we were talking about, I started out with Dell computers, and there goes that back plate. And the Dell computers that I bought, and so at the back, on the back of your motherboard is going to be like this back plate once you unscrew that. So got to kind of line those things back up here. There we go. Now what they've got here is they've got, I think this one we just screw, were there spacers in this? Let me take a look for spacers, hold on. Oh, I did find the AMD spacers here. Okay, that makes sense. I was like, what? You probably have to have spacers on this thing. I mean, the video I watched and the instructions show it. So I'm getting this thing open. There we go. All right. So this is going to kind of be interesting because I've got to kind of hold this mounting plate in the spaces where the 4 holes go. So you might see them kind of pop up there. Then we've got to put this spacer on here somehow. Looks like that way. And we probably got to put another spacer on there. There looks like there's a circle hole on one side and kind of a screw-in hole on the other. So we'll just kind of do that. And to me, it looks like, oh, do these have to go this way? No. There, that must be correct right there. Boy, that's a fat girl. Dang. That's a big fan. Okay. This is probably going to drop again. Okay, so after dropping these screws a couple times, which is always kind of my thing, like I just like always dropping stuff. Okay, so let's try to line this guy back up. There we go. This is there's probably a much easier way to do this, but I'm just doing it my first time, so we're just going to figure it out. And then we have these screws, so I have to kind of like one hand a lot of this. So I'll probably just like start that by hand there. Grab another screw here. And it does look like you know, this little tiny latch will hold on to this thing. All right, so that's good enough to at least kind of get her going. And one thing with any kind of, you know, screwing surface, we just kind of screw a little, you know, on each side until it kind of gets tight. All right, so that actually feels fairly snug. Now I should be able to remove my hand here and get the other side in. Get these spacers on. Yep. So the little circle side, you know, maybe you can see it. Where's the camera? Over here. So it's kind of got like a circle side that, yeah, I know, I got to cut my nails too. I've just been super busy, whatever. Yeah, so we can actually just kind of pre-drop these screws into here like this. Joe watching like, screw it in, you idiot. There we go. All right, so we'll just kind of alternate screwing these in here. Okay. All right. So now what you can see is the very bottom of these screws here have kind of an opening for their screws right here. But before we do that, we got to put thermal paste on. So let's go ahead and do that next. Now, some of you may say, oh, you got to get the Arctic this or the Thermal Grizzly that or whatever. You're probably right. But a lot of the fans that I bought over the years kind of come with this default thermal paste, and maybe it's not the best, but I've never really had any cooling issues with the applications that I've been running. You know, whether I'm running Salad or running a Bitcoin node, I've just never had any problems with it. But I do have a Thermal Grizzly little spreader here. So I'm a guy that wants to get a lot of good stuff on here. So typically what I'll do is I'll just, you know, put it on whatever way you want. And draw whatever pattern you like. And that's pretty much everything I got on this one, so I might have to get some more. But once it's on there, you just take your little shovel and just kind of get it everywhere. The whole point of this thermal paste is to cover the entire processor. And so some people I've seen, they'll just put like a dab in the middle and like call it a day. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're not even covering, you know, the whole thing. And I think that there's, you know, you could probably go and watch a bunch of videos about how to do your thermal paste. This is the way that I do it. I just want to get a little bit literally everywhere. So as we can kind of keep working this paste here, and I might need a little bit more. I'm going to move to the other side here just to reposition myself a little bit and spread it out a little bit nicer. There we go. That actually might be enough here. I might come over here a little bit. Can't really see. But I think you can kind of get the point here that I've literally covered the entire processor, right? And whatever leftover I have, I'm just going to put on the fan. Or, yeah, the fan here. Now, one thing that I have heard about this particular fan is it has some ridges on it, which can be some issues with cooling. So I'm not, you know, I don't really know. Anyways, so I've just kind of covered the bottom of this with the leftover thermal paste that I had. All right, so this should be pretty simple now. We've got the RGB cord here. It's got the kind of 3 pins. It's a 4-pin thing, but one's missing. That's how you know it's RGB. And from what I can see here, I'm probably going to have to unlatch this fan. So it looks like it just kind of pulls. All right, pulls right off there. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and get this guy mounted. So this is the cooler. So this should just line up with the holes here. And I should be able to just screw them down. It definitely is locking on there. Kind of the same deal with the cooler. Yeah, that's on there. Wow, that's on there good. We're just going to kind of do a little bit back and forth. You know, I think there's like a, do it 2 or 3 turns and 2 or 3 turns. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. Oh, I don't think I lied. I don't think I had that one even down there. Yep, so I gotta unscrew this one a little bit now. Oh. I'm gonna unscrew this a little bit more. So we've got to get this guy down. There, now I think we got it. Yep. Oh yeah, that's nice now. Okay. You know, the concept is here, we're trying to get this thing flat onto the processor, because you can see that that processor is, you know, fairly flat. So we want the contact of this cooler to contact the processor, so all that heat that's coming off the processor dissipates through this fan structure, or this cooler structure. And then the fan just helps move. That's actually tightened all the way on that side. So it looks like I was short a little bit on this side, but now we're completely tightened down. I'm not a guy that's gonna sit here and screw this thing as hard as I can into the, you know, pound it in the ground or whatever. Now we've got the RGB fan. And this guy looked like it just snapped on. So if we can snap him back on, that would be pretty sweet. It looks like, oh no, no. All right. Make sure that you have this pointing this way. I think this actually just has like a, like you can just pull it. Yep, there we go. There. So it's kind of got this little, just like, it's like a, pulling like a clothes hanger. So I think that's about it. I mean, that's on there pretty good. So the fan obviously is just supposed to, you know, I presume it sucks air in and it's going to push it out through this fan out the side here if it ever gets super hot. All right, so we should be all set with the RGB fan there. Yeah, looks pretty good. Okay, now I can already kind of see a problem with how big this fan is. You see, these are the RAM slots for the memory, and I like Kingston Fury. You know, they don't even make 32 gigs of these anymore, which is just crazy to me. So I've actually had to switch over to a G-Skill, and the G-Skill has been working out pretty good for another computer that I'm working on. But normally we just take this RAM, and you have to have DDR4 for a DDR4 motherboard. The first time I ordered a motherboard when I was working on computers by myself, I ordered a DDR5, and I was like, why doesn't my RAM fit in here? Because the DDR5 motherboards have to have DDR5 RAM, and the DDR4 motherboards come with DDR4 RAM. And you can kind of notice just by the way that the slots line up. So you can see there's this little notch there and a little notch here. And DDR5 will not fit in DDR4. DDR5 RAM will not fit in a DDR4 motherboard, and vice versa. So a lot of your motherboards, you can just pop both sides out. Some of them you may only have to pop one side out in order to fit the RAM in, but these should be two 16 gigabyte modules. I do not like running a computer with really anything less than 32 gig of RAM. If you're just like gaming or whatever, you know, that should be fine. But for mining, whether you're CPU mining or doing AI, you really want 64, preferably 96. You know, preferably 96, and I've run AI rigs with 128 gig of RAM, and those always seem to do the best. So the more RAM, the better. But you can see here, I literally don't even think I can fit this. Now let's see. Holy crap, it might fit. Well, but that is that is tight. That is tight right there. But it's good enough for me. So I'm actually gonna grab I'm grabbing some 32 gig modules. These should be the 232s. Oh, and of course, I have them in the wrong bays. So one other thing, when you're doing RAM, you got to have the same amount in every other bay. So it's like bay 1, bay 3, or bay 0, bay 2, whatever. I don't care what the technical terms are. But yeah, if you're having odd duck RAM situation like I have here, where I'm doing two 16s, and I'm going to do two 32s. The 32s have to be opposite of each other. They can't really be next to each other. And vice versa. Okay, so this should be 96 gig of RAM, and man, is that tight. Okay. Now, I do have to put in a graphics card. I have a 3060 I just got. It's an Asus ROG Strix. Asus, wait, no. It's just an Asus ROG Strix. What the hell is it? Yeah, it's just a ROG Strix. Now, this is a 36. This thing is a pig. I've just noticed really any Asus like ROG Strix graphics cards are kind of becoming my favorite because they're just so big and the coolers are huge and the fans are, I've heard really good things about them. But anyways, so we've got our RAM in, we got our CPU in. Now we're gonna save the graphics cards. It pops in here last. And I'm not even a monkey with a hard drive right now because this is really just about building the computer. We can pop in a hard drive. You know, this particular motherboard has NVMe 2 slot, you know, right here, and there's one underneath here as well. So it looks like I have two, you know, that I can use on this motherboard. But what I want to do next is go ahead and get the power supply in. So let's go find a power supply. Okay, we found a power supply. Back when I was doing a lot of mining, which I still haven't finished that story on the mining about the Dell computers, I bought a lot of EVGA power supplies. EVGA was a really good brand back in the day. And so I never sold these. So I've still got some 850 watt power supplies. Now, when we're talking about power supplies, you just want to make sure that whatever graphics card you're doing or processor you're doing, that you have enough power. You don't want to overheat this guy and really stress him out. So this is an 850 watt power supply, more than enough to handle this 5700X CPU and the RAM and a 3060 graphics card. In fact, I have the same power supply running a 4070 Ti and a 4070. So yeah, we're going to have no problems with this. Now, because the power supply goes in the underside here, I'm going to kind of lift this guy up and put him upright. Now, you probably won't really be able to see too much of me working on the power supply. But let me try to see if I can get this guy turned all the way over. Maybe you can see something. Normally I work with this upright. I don't really like working with it like this, but we'll give it a shot just for video purposes. So you can see the back of the case has the case fan cords for RGB and for power. But we're going to go ahead and put this guy in, and you can see there's some screw holes, and this just goes in the very back of your Montech unit. Now your case may be different. And I am actually going to tip this guy up because we are now to the point where I don't need to have him flat anymore. All right, now you're probably not really going to see what I'm doing here, but I'm just kind of lining up the power supply with the motherboard, or sorry, the case. And I'm going to go back to my handy dandy case pack here. And inside of your case pack, right here from your motherboard or your case, there should be some screws for other things. So we have fans, and looky here, here's the PSU one. So I'm going to open up my PSU now. I only need 4 screws out of this. Most of these cases are going to give you more screws than what you really need. And we're going to screw this in here. Now you probably can't even really see that. Let me see if I can. I can't really see what I'm doing here, but I'm over on this side by the power supply, screwing that in. Now, if you've never worked with a power supply before, all power supplies have a couple of different super important cords that come with them. And one has to go to your graphics card. That's your VGA cord. One would go to your processor, that is labeled CPU. And then you're probably going to have a couple of cords that go to the motherboard, to power the motherboard. I'm actually only going to put 3 screws in this power supply. So this is the motherboard. It's a pretty thick cable here. One side, this one goes into the motherboard. It says MB on it. And then we've got this PSU. So you can see it says this end goes in the PSU, this end goes in the motherboard. So I'm going to go ahead and find, now that it's in, the case, sometimes it's a little more difficult to I had a flashlight around here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Sometimes people, what they'll do is they'll connect the power supply first and then put all the cords in. I'm just kind of doing this for the old demonstration purpose here. All right, so I'm just going to connect the PSU ends to the power supply. Now, every time that you push these in, you should hear like a little click. You know, you might have heard that on my mic. And then what I really like about the Montechs is the way that the cables kind of come in here. I think they call these like grommets, you know, little rubber grommets to hold all your stuff in there. All right, and I'm going to need a CPU cable. So when you buy a power supply, it should come with all your cables. So here's one that says, sorry, CPU, and this one says CPU. Okay, now this one doesn't say, you know, to the PSU, but this end is what goes into the PSU. So if you've got a split, something like this for your VGA cord or your CPU cord, these, you know, don't go into your PSU. One other thing that I'm going to say about this is that when you are putting your cables into your power supply, you know, make sure you're putting them in the right slot. You know, if you put them in the wrong slot, you're going to have problems. So I'm putting this CPU cable into this CPU power supply slot here. All right, that's done. Put that one up through here. Okay, and the last one we really need is the VGA. Now, my next video, maybe I'll put in a hard drive and install Windows and some other stuff, but I'm going to be putting my VGA cable into my VGA slot. The VGA powers the graphics cards. And we'll just push that through the, there we go. Now, there are a couple other cables on the back end of the, let's see if I can get this to show. So this is where the cable police come and arrest me because I'm not like a super big cable management person. You know, we have these little zip ties that we can work with. That's fine. And by the way, if you've got an SSD, that's where this goes on a Montech back here. But you're going to have a bunch of cables here that come with your case. And these cables connect your motherboard to do a bunch of different things. So what I'm going to do here, I guess I don't need the light on anymore, is just undo this little tie here. Okay. So you got a bunch of different cables here. So, you know, I believe this is a USB cable right here. We've got an audio cable, we've got a power cable, and I don't even know what this one does. But I just find all the spots on the motherboard to plug those in. And they may go in different spots depending on, you know, where those are on the motherboard. But for right now, I'm just going to shove them all right here for right now, just so they're kind of out of the way. And then we'll connect everything on the back end here. Yeah, you can get mad at me. I know this isn't perfect. All right, so now we've got this monstrosity. You can see this looks like an octopus now. Got all these cables, you know, that came in here. All right, so first things first, motherboard needs its power. That's this cat. All right, so you're going to line up the little clicker, the snappy tab. There's going to be a edge for it to clip onto here. You should hear that kind of click. And sometimes I will take a flashlight and just make sure there's not like a gap. Make sure there's not like a gap. And it doesn't look like there's. Looks like that's on there really good. All right. Now, next thing is going to be the CPU. Now, one thing I can tell right now is that the CPU is way over here, so I'm going to actually push this CPU cord back through. Right here. And I want to move it to where it's closest, which is actually way up over in this corner here. All right, same thing with the CPU. You know, you're going to have a lip for it to most likely click onto here. And again, I'm just using the flashlight because I'm old. And the CPU has 2 4 pins that have to go in to the motherboard here. I find that the CPU is kind of a pain in the butt to get in here. Out of all the cables, I think we're good. All right. That looks seated pretty well. All right. Sometimes you can pull on it a little bit as well, you know, if you want to make sure. Now this is the power, so I should really route this one underneath here. So I don't need to have this power cable looking all stupid here, because I do believe that that's the power. So we're just going to pull him back out. And then we'll route him right underneath here. Now with the power cable, you might have to zoom in on this, but you can see that there's basically 4 pins on the bottom and 3 pins on the top, or vice versa. There's going to be 1 pin that's missing. And so I can kind of look at this power section down here, and I can see that, okay, I got to line this thing up so that this space hits the right spot. I think it's going to be this. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you here is that if you're not 100% sure... Oh, this one's the power. My bad. This was the audio. Yes. This was the audio. Huh. Okay. So we'll just kind of move the audio one over a little bit, and here's the power one. It's got the same thing with 4 pins on one side and 3 pins on the other, but I can tell that this one's the power one. So again, I'm just going to kind of pull this guy out for now. Move him down a level here. Okay. Yes. This should be correct. This should give us all of our power. Now, one thing with these little pins, as I was starting to say before, is you want to be super gentle with this. This is the one thing you do not want to push too hard on, because if you do, you could bend these little tiny sensitive pins, and then you have a problem. Oh, I've got it on the wrong side. There's actually 5 pins on this power on one side and 4 on the other. So actually, yeah, this has to go on this side. Here we go. No wonder it was giving me so much problems. It wasn't going to fit. Okay, now we can get that audio cable here that we were just working on. I don't, with any of these computers, I don't really run any audio. But if you do, then this is what you can use it for. And actually, I'm just going to put it in the same spot here. And just by kind of looking here, we've got 4. It's actually 5, 3, and 1. Okay. So we've got the audio way over here on this side. Sheesh, do I really want to... I guess I can run it all the way over here. Yep. Alright, so the audio is in. I may move that down the road, I'm not sure. Because that's really kind of in the way. Alright, now the next thing is, got our USB right here. Alright, there should be a USB port somewhere, I would think, hopefully. Ah, right down here. So I'm probably going to route that down a little bit again. And I actually already see that this cable can go with it. All right. So USB cable, it's going to have a notch on it. Just kind of pay attention where that notch is. Well, this guy might be getting in the way a little bit, so let's see. Now, yeah, the USB, a lot of times I have had to kind of give it some pressure. That's one of these pins that I kind of be like, oh, I got to give you a little bit of pressure. And I don't even know what this guy does, but I know he goes right here. There we go. All right, this is kind of a mess. I may monkey with that a little bit down the road, but we should have enough now to at least, after I get the video card installed here, to power this thing up and see if it works. Okay, so now we're on to installing the graphics card. And this is just going to be a matter of undoing probably a couple. Let me turn this off. I don't need this anymore. Probably doing a couple of these protectors here. I'll just kind of guess. Now, like I said, these Asus ones are pretty large graphics cards, so it's probably going to require a couple of slots. Sorry, Daddy. My dog was laying next to me. I didn't even know she was. Hi, Daddy. Sorry, I didn't know you were here, honey. You're kind of quiet. Sorry about that. All right, let's see if this is going to fit in here. Oh, and by the way, when you get your new graphics card, it's going to have a bunch of plastic on it. Make sure you take that off. Now this is a brand new 3060. I find that for brand new 3060s, you can get them, for under $300. And I know other people can say, oh, well, you can get a used one for $250 or $200 or something. That's great. If you want to buy used, go for it. I'm not going to say don't, and I'm not going to monkey with the fans right now. Is there anything else on here? No, I don't think so. But I'm just, I don't want to buy somebody else's used stuff if it's only going to save me $100 or $50 or something like that. And I've just seen, I'm going to pull all these plugs out here. And I've just seen so many people be scammed on Facebook, and it's like a rummage sale, man. I mean, at least when you buy from eBay, and I have bought used graphics cards from eBay before. Oh, still plastic on here. And I've had pretty good luck with eBay because, you know, eBay does have a 30-day refund policy. So anyways, these graphics cards just slide into the holes here. Now this motherboard actually has 4 graphics card slots, which is actually pretty cool. And I might undo the one up above it because it looks like there's kind of a primary one with a super nice latch that I want to use here. Let's see if I can get in there with that or if I got to redo a different one. So we just got to make sure that we can fit this guy down. There we go. And you'll hear it kind of click as well. And then we can screw these screws that we just took out back in. Now, I do find if you're able to put the a little protector in here, that's kind of nice. It does give it a little bit more support. Come on, there we go. I think we just got it on there. All right, perfect. So I can just screw in the graphics card here. And we'll screw in these. I think this screwdriver is a little bit better for this situation. A little bit bigger. All right, so now we're going to close up this bay here. And we're going to put in the power supply cable, or sorry, the VGA cable from the power supply. And again, just make sure you're putting it in the right direction. And a little click. Okay, short of doing all the RGB and fans, which we should do. So here's a fan and an RGB from our CPU, right? So we can, there are going to be spots on the motherboard where you can plug in these fans. So let's see if we can find them here real quick. Here's the CPU fan right here. So this one actually would be for just the CPU fan. So there is a spot on here. Okay, CPU fan should be in. Now, that should be good there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this RGB fan. Oh, my flashlight just died. And I'm going to connect up all my other fans to it, and we should be able to get everything kind of pigtailed into one, because Montech does a pretty good job with that. Okay. Just going to turn this guy around here and show you. Okay. So this is all the RGB fans and whatever. So we can kind of undo, you know, these, pigtail them together, and then we should be able to just put them together on one spot on the motherboard. If I was going to add, you know, some more RGB fans like I have done with my 4070 rig, I got some RGB fans on the top of the computer to suck some more air out. I really just did it for fun. It's not like I even really leave the front panel on these things downstairs here, which is where my corner is, you know, in the house. But I did them just for like coolness and like literal coolness and figuratively coolness. Okay, so we can see that this has to go on the motherboard right here, and this has to go on the motherboard right here. And we can kind of undo these little things right here and kind of get these cables loose. All right, so really, you know, this is an RGB piggyback, and you can pull this pin off of this guy and piggyback this guy. And what this is going to do is whatever settings you can see, and we've got 2 and 1, and they should just be able to pop in real nice. Pop. We're good. Okay. So now our RGB, we have basically these two fans that have to get, or these two have to get connected to the motherboard. One does the RGB, one does the fans. All right, so I'm just going to undo this guy to give me some slack for right now. Oh, anyways, and back to the way before. I was buying Dell computers pre-made, and life was just pretty easy back then. I know the RGB thing, and there's probably a fan header up here as well. That I did just buy pre-made computers before, but as time went on, I was just like, you know, when you look at the parts cost versus what Dell charges you to pre-make it, it was like, well, I could actually save a couple $100, you know, per computer, even if I bought all new parts instead of having Dell, you know, assemble everything for me. So that was kind of a cool thing that, you know, you could save a little bit of money. And the other thing was, I just didn't like the software that Dell installed. There was just so much trash that Dell would install on their computers. I think a lot of people call it bloatware, you know, that they just have a lot of crap on their computers. And I just did not want to deal with that. I was actually struggling with some other Dell computers that I had in the past, and I kind of got really tired of Dell really quick. I'm just going to kind of tie these down a little bit here. And those going to kind of all go underneath there for now. All right, so outside of my fan cables, which you can yell at me for, you know, whatever, we should be getting pretty close here. Okay, so like we said before, we got this RGB header up here, and we have a fan right there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the RGB first. And our fan header right here. Where is my fans? It's too bad my flashlight wasn't working. Does this one work? Hi, Dottie. Sorry, honey. I didn't mean to kick you before. Of course, no, that doesn't work. I think my fan is way over here. I'm actually looking on the side of the motherboard here to see if I can get this thing in. All right, I think I got it. Okay, so short of a hard drive, you know, to install Windows and all that other stuff, this thing should boot to a motherboard. So let's find out. Okay, so here's the moment of truth. I just turned on the power. So you have the power cable on, HDMI cable. I threw in an Ethernet and my USB cable here. So let's see if it turns on. Okay, so we've got a lot of fans spinning here. So we've got fans there. The GPU's powering up. So far it looks like we got power. Oh wow, I do like that's pretty cool on the graphics card there. Okay, I don't see anything on the screen here yet. And there it is. All right, so new CPU installed, blah, blah, blah. Press Y to reset. Press N to keep previous. Yep, we put a new, so we'll just push on Y. And this should eventually boot to the BIOS, which is just the basically software for the motherboard. Okay, so you saw the Gigabyte there. Come on, baby. I mean, I do hear it kind of starting up again here. Okay, and there we go. BIOS has been reset. Please reconfigure your BIOS if needed. We can click on OK. And now we're officially into the Gigabyte BIOS. So what this tells me is when we look at this stuff here, we can see our RAM over here. So remember we did 232s, 216s. Here's our AMD 5700X. We've got 96 gig of RAM, selling us our CPU temp, which is actually really cool. That's actually significantly cooler than what I'm used to seeing normally in the 40s and 50s, even just kind of hanging out. So that's really nice. Now we don't have any hard drives installed yet, but we can see our CPU fan and our system fans are going. So here we go. Everything is ready to go, people. So I'm going to finish up doing the hard drive install, and we'll install Windows and whatever in our next time, okay? So this is all the hardware we really need to cover for this time, just to make sure everything's working. All right, so if you haven't hit the snooze button yet or fallen asleep through this entire thing, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you find this video interesting and maybe you know somebody that is brand new to computers, or maybe they just want to learn about how to assemble a computer from start to finish minus the hard drive and the operating system install, feel free to share this video. You can make fun of me all you want in the comments below. This is not my strong suit. It's just something I'm willing to share with the community. And if you get a laugh out of it, or if you think it's worth a like, go ahead and click the like button below. All right, until next time. Peace.